I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Environment. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests that tell us about our environment, tell us what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and how we can fix it. I find experts, and I work very hard to find them, and I'm delighted to have today's expert with us. His name is George Meyer, and he's the director of the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. He has had a long and renowned career with the DNR, and it's a privilege for me to have him share the next half hour with you and me and talk about our Wisconsin environment. George, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Well, you and I are in the same age group, and so we enjoy some of the same vices. And talking off camera, we like the North and grouse hunting. Tell me a little bit about your background in hunting grouse.
Well, I grew up, in east central Wisconsin, Canyon Farm. We had partridge on our farm, so when I got out of college and started working in DNR, I had a chance to go up north and became a little bit addicted to the wily grouse in northern Wisconsin.
And what is so special about an October afternoon on a logging trail?
It's got to be the most beautiful time of the year. It's great exercise. I didn't have dogs myself, but working with friends and their dogs or whatever, it's just a beautiful time to be out there. And a challenge, obviously, to be hunting a very difficult animal to harvest at times, but it's really a wonderful time.
And of course, we've learned that grouse is one of the many species of our wildlife that we can't stockpile. We don't seem to be able to control how many grouse there are going to be next fall.
That is correct. And interestingly, it's the third most popular game animal in the state. After after deer and then waterfowl. There hasn't been a grouse management plan in the state. The first one's being developed now. We are blessed with some of the best grouse habitat in the country. And that's really has helped us maintain very healthy populations. But you're right. There's a cycle associated with grouse, and there's various theories behind that. But also, the population can go up and down, and you can't stockpile them from year to year. You're going to get what that year has, and go on from there.
What are the keys to a healthy grouse pasture? I want grouse on my farm. What should I do?
Well, I'm not a biologist, but obviously various tree populations that we have in northern Wisconsin or hardwoods are really very helpful, are the key species to have on your property. But northern Wisconsin does have the best habitat, and that's why largely it's sportsmen go up there to do the best grouse hunting.
I hear rumors that our grouse population has not measured up to the anticipated peak, and there are some theories that there are mosquitoes behind it. Is that it?
Well, Nile virus, which is it's a avian or bird disease, and it's you see it anything from crows or whatever. And there's out east, Pennsylvania, Maine, and whatever, they have found Nile virus in the grouse populations. Hasn't adversely affected too much in Maine, who has outstanding habitat like we do. Pennsylvania, which has weaker habitat, has had more, I think, more of an impact on populations. But we did not know in Wisconsin, work had not been done, one, to find out if it's in our populations, and two, what the impacts are. So this past year, in a cooperative project between Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, there was a joint study. One, do we have it? And then what are the impacts on populations? Now, the study is underway. They did find it, those results are in, but they are looking, trying to determine what in population level impacts there are. And importantly, they're developing the first grouse management plan. There's management plans for deer and a lot of other species, but never one on grouse. So that information is going to be put into this plan, which will then help property owners and wildlife managers come up with a strategy for managing them. But from what I hear from talking to wildlife biologists, it's basically to maintain the quality of habitat. Good sustainable forestry management is going to be the key to deal with the shifts in population, including those affected by Nile virus.
Well, when I go up north grouse hunting and I try to find out from the natives where the grouse are, they don't want to talk to me about grouse, they want to talk about wolves. Now, there's a real controversy about wolves. Can you discuss that?
It is. The wolf population, I signed the first wolf management plan in 1997. The populations have built up in the state. They weren't stocked. They've come over from Minnesota. And the state wolf management plan, for it not to be on the federal endangered species list, is 250, on the state list was 250 wolves in northern Wisconsin. The federal standard was 100 wolves, only 100 in the UP and Wisconsin combined. Well, there's been efforts to delist it. They've been challenged in court 3 or 4 times. Technicalities have held back that delisting. So now the minimum population, and I emphasize minimum, is well over 990. The state goal is 350 now, to have a low buffer between that 250. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is taking another run at delisting the population. They're satisfied. It's not going to go back on the endangered species list because of the state management plan, the quality of it. The biologists from all 3 DNRs, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, plus the U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologists are satisfied with that. DNR is going to have to maintain its management strategy that they commit to with oversight by the federal government. But there are people that are opposed to it, and I'm sure we're going to end up back in court. In the meantime, there's major impact on sportsmen in terms of their hunting dogs, on farmers, and on pet owners in northern Wisconsin. And when I say minimum, the population may be 50% more than that 900, but those are the ones that are in packs that are tracked by collars and that type of thing.
Well, I'm glad that we have your organization and people like you looking out for our wildlife. It would be a delight to walk a logging road with you in the fall with our shotguns, and I can bring a dog and look for a grouse or a woodcock and hopefully see a wolf. And we're so fortunate in Wisconsin to have people like you and the Wildlife Federation looking out, but we've got to keep one eye open ourselves and make our wishes known, don't we, George? We're going to have to take a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Environment. George Meyer and I are talking about our great state, our great natural resources, but there are a couple of stones in the bed here and there that we have to make people aware of and do something about. And one of them that has attained a lot of information, a lot of attention, a lot of concern is chronic wasting disease. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, chronic wasting disease is a disease of what are called prions, which is organic matter in our deer herd, and it's highly indestructible in terms of being a protein, but also it is there's no cure for it, and ultimately it's 100% terminal for deer. Now the deer may not die from the disease itself, but it weakens them so they're susceptible to every other kind of disease or getting hit by a car or whatever, and they waste away and become just not able to function. Came in Wisconsin in 2001. It was, or 2002. It was found in in the state, down in Iowa County, and has spread largely because the last 8 to 10 years, not much has been done to slow the spread. And it has spread a couple ways it can be spread is, for instance, if you're in an area that has chronic wasting disease and you shoot a deer that has the disease, it may be an early stage, you may not have be able to identify it, and you may test it, but say you're in that area and you take the deer back to another area and then cut it and clean it, whatever, and leave the carcass, the remains, a carcass on the land that has prions in it. Gets in the soil, can get spread by scavengers and whatever, and then can spread to the deer herd where you are. Another clearly important way is through deer farms in the state. And we have over 300 deer farms in the state, 26 of which have been found to have chronic wasting disease. And some have been depopulated, but there's still some being allowed to be operated by the Department of Agriculture, which regulates them. Some of those just have a single fence around them. And so if a tree falls and the deer get out, and that's happened, it happens about 30 times a year that happens in the state in various farms. The deer can get into the wild herd, spread the prions through feces and urine. Other deer, wild deer, can get it. They get out through the gates. 30% of the escapes are because the gates are open on the deer farms. So it has spread. So now there's only 19 counties in the state that either don't have it in their herd or are within 10 miles of a deer farm that has chronic wasting disease. Now, what does this mean? Is it just low-level percentage? In Iowa County, where it first started, where it was first found, in about the 2 or 3 townships where it was first found, 50% of the bucks tested every year show that they have chronic wasting disease. So it is it will gradually affect larger and larger percentages of the deer herd in the state. It's been shown in west where it first appeared to have an impact on populations. So we anticipate over the long term it will have impact on populations. It has not, to people's knowledge, crossed over into humans at this stage. But that is, it's not impossible for that to happen. And as these prions mutate, that is a possibility. It's never happened yet, but if you talk to any of the national or state or international health organizations, they do have a warning encouraging people, if they have a deer, to have it tested for chronic wasting disease. You can make up your own mind. I know we have tested our deer for years. We have not found one, but if we did, we would not eat that animal. That's our personal choice, and many sportsmen and women in the state make that same decision.
Now, other states have had the experience. Have any of them come up with a plan that works to reverse it or stop it?
Well, the states that have had really been aggressive when there's an outbreak at shooting down the deer herd in the area have had some success. Illinois has had some success in that, just across the border from Wisconsin. And you really, the idea behind it is to keep it contained. So if we do find that silver bullet or silver bullets, we can deal with it in a smaller area. If it starts spreading throughout the state, if we do find some vaccine or other way of dealing with it, it becomes almost cost prohibitive to solve the problem later on.
But obviously, it's more dangerous, and we're asking for trouble by having too many deer concentrated in a place to make it so easy for them to transfer this.
That is correct. And also this idea of spreading, whether the carcass or live deer on a deer farm, we're just asking for trouble to spread it into new areas, to get new hubs of the disease spreading.
It's a scary disease. Is it a cousin of the mad cow disease that we've read about 20 years ago?
It is. It's also a cousin of scabies in sheep. But, you know, I don't want to be too alarmist, but mad cow disease on beef, you know, people were saying, well, it's never going to cross the barrier. Well, there's a bunch of graves in England which will tell you it does cross it. And God forbid it would happen with chronic wasting disease. It's surely not impossible.
We're going to have to end this segment with that scary news, but we'll be right back with some better news on another subject about your environment. Welcome back to It's Your Environment. George Meyer and I are discussing many of the challenges and problems to make our environment here in the state of Wisconsin better, as good as it could be for future generations and for our own safe enjoyment. But we're just one of 50 states, as I recall, and other states have problems. In fact, nationally, we have some challenges with respect to the environment. And what is your national organization doing about them?
Well, there's several issues to work on. Some are good news, though. The Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund. It's sort of a national stewardship program like we have in Nelson. January, think about how Congress doesn't always work so well anymore. In the month of January, after about 4 years of work of conservation organizations, both the House and the Senate passed the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And it just got signed into law by the president last week. This is money that goes to the states, and it's not taxpayer dollars. It uses offshore oil royalties, and it's used for public lands and development of public lands, recreational lands. Since its start, Wisconsin got over $230 million. And it goes to local units of government, state government, and some is spent by federal agencies. But it's a lot of municipal parks. It isn't always just wildlands type of thing. In fact, a lot of it goes for the swing sets and buying a new park in a community or whatever to the national forest. And of course, some of it's used by DNR. And in January, it was made permanent. So it'll be a permanent program, because politics had always gotten in the way, and for instance, it expired in September, a little brinksmanship. But Congress got so much feedback from the public, they said, okay, we're going to fix it, we're going to make it a permanent appropriation. So that is a big win. Other challenges, the current EPA is rolling back is proposing to roll back a lot of the environmental standards, and the state standards get based on that, so it could impact us directly in this state. There's a law in this state that the state standards have to match the federal standards. Well, if they weaken the federal standards to allow more air and water pollution, that means the state pollution will increase. The head of EPA is a coal company lobbyist, and has really changed a lot of the perspectives on the Department of Interior, which manages a lot of the federal lands, Bureau of Land Management lands, monuments, and a lot of the refuges or whatever. That he's actually was a lobbyist for the oil and gas industry, and so you know where they're coming from and they've opened up a lot of lands to a lot more of the oil and gas, and is really impacting some of the wildlife habitat out west.
And how can the public protect itself and show their interest if they disapprove of some of this exploitation of the natural resources?
Well, from time to time, there's public hearings on these federal changes, there's comments they can send into the agencies, but also just let their state or house or their congressmen and their senators know that we disapprove of this. We want clean water and clean air in the state, and we want good wildlife habitat. Don't allow this kind of rollbacks to take place by the federal agencies. They control the budgets of those agencies, and they can specify that there won't be changes. So it really is troubling to see, after all these years and progress has been made, that we're actually going backwards on the federal level.
Well, often it's about money in Madison or in Washington, D.C., and I'm not sure that this is true simply because I read it in the Wall Street Journal, but it seems to me I read this past week that the current president's budget is cutting back in every area except defense and the wall. Everything else, EPA, environmental protection, and many of these other protections, welfare-type protection, insurance for the poor, and consumer agencies and all those things are being sacrificed in order to have enough money for our defense and for the issue of the immigration.
I think the one other area that he's not cutting back, thank God, is for veterans. But in terms, just EPA as an example, 31% cut in their budget. Now that cripples an agency that's been cut back for many years already. They haven't had increases, and in fact, they've had many reductions over the last 10 to 20 years. But a 31, and there's no oversight. And one of the roles of EPA is to make sure the states are doing their job. All these programs, whether it's Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, the states carry out the program on a state level and with oversight of EPA. Well, if you get some states starting to allow things to happen that aren't within the law, states like Wisconsin are going to be disadvantaged economically. They can go to a business and say, "I don't worry about putting that $1 million plant or control equipment on here. Don't worry about that. We're going to lower our standard." Well, then where's our businesses are going to be competitively disadvantaged. So you need that level playing field and that federal oversight to make sure there aren't rogue states undermining the good intentions of other states.
Well, we know that corporate interests have their lobbyists, and well, they should. They're guaranteed that right by several parts of the Constitution, and they know how to reach our politicians, our legislators, and maybe support them and persuade them and things like that. But the public, the individual citizen, doesn't have a lobbyist unless they belong to an organization like yours that has a lobbyist.
Yes, we go to Washington 4 or 5 times a year on various issues. We're part of the National Wildlife Federation, which has staff dedicated in D.C. To work on many of these issues. Part of the problem is, and you almost feel sorry for the congressmen, senators, they have to spend a good part of their days on a phone raising money. Now, under the laws, they can raise money through various ways, through businesses. It may not be directly, but through trade organizations or PACs or whatever that money can go into. Does that have influence? Well, you'd have to be pretty naive to think it doesn't,
Well, now wait a minute. The Supreme Court says that's not money, that's free speech.
Yeah. Some people talk a lot louder than you and I do. And the average citizen that's watching this has a very minute voice compared to many of these other people or businesses do.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I thank George Meyer for being willing to share some time with us today. I've admired George for a long time. He's had a great career. He's well respected. Out of law school, he went to work for our Department of Natural Resources and worked his way right to the top. And the Natural Resources Board itself appointed him to be the head DNR guy. Later on, 3 more governors appointed him. He's nationally recognized, and he's respected by all of the political interests, which is rare. He has never worried about whether his idea benefited the Republicans or the Democrats or the independents. He's just been a watchdog for our environment. I think his wisdom is obvious. He's continued with the Wisconsin Federation for Wildlife, and he's doing a great job for them. But it takes more than one George Meyer. It takes every one of us as citizens to be a watchdog. I urge you to join an organization like the Wildlife Federation because they will keep you advised on the issues. But more importantly, I want you to get off your sofa, get informed, and get in the face of a legislature and say, this resource is mine and I want it protected. Thank you. That's my opinion. I'm George Curtis.